Let me tell you a story which happened a long while ago. I was sent a young patient who suffered from incurable insomnia. She was a teacher who'd successfully completed her studies, but who lived in constant fear of making a mistake. She'd got into an unbearable state of spasmodic tension. I tried to explain to her that psychic relaxation was necessary, that I, for example, found relaxation by sailing on the lake, by letting myself go with the wind. That this was good for one, necessary for everybody. But I could see by her eyes that she didn't understand. Then, as I talked of sailing and of the wind, I heard the voice of my mother singing a lullaby to my little sister, as she used to do when I was 8 or 9. A story of a little girl in a little boat on the Rhine with little fishes. And I began, almost without doing it on purpose, to hum what I was telling her about the wind, the waves, the sailing and relaxation, to the tune of the little lullaby. I could see that she was enchanted. Years later, her doctor told me she came back cured, and I always wanted to know what you had done. All she could tell me was some story about sailing and the wind, and I never could get her to tell me what you really did. How was I to explain to him that I had simply listened to something within myself? How was I to tell him that I had sung her a lullaby with my mother's voice? Enchantment like that is the oldest form of medicine. But it all happened outside of my reason. It was not until later that I thought about it rationally and tried to arrive at the laws behind it. She was cured by the grace of God.
At Bollingen, near Zurich, Jung built, largely with his own hands, the house he called the Tower. It was his own personal retreat, where he spent more and more time in the last 30 years of his life. Coming to the Tower was an act of recollection, as Jung withdrew into a place which was itself an expression of his own psyche in stone.
Here, everything has its history and mine. Here is space for the spaceless kingdom of the worlds and the psyche's hinterland. There is nothing to disturb the dead, neither electric light nor telephone. I tend the fireplace and stove myself. Evenings I light the old lamps. There's no running water, and I pump water from the well. I chop the wood and cook the food. These simple acts make man simple. How difficult it is to be simple. In Bollingen, silence surrounds me almost audibly, and I live in modest harmony with nature. Thoughts rise to the surface which reach back into the centuries. From the beginning, I felt the Tower was in some way a maternal womb in which I could become what I was, what I am, and will be. It gave me a feeling as if I were being reborn in stone. At times, I feel as if I'm spread out over the landscape and inside things, and am myself living in every tree, in the clouds, in the procession of the seasons. We moderns are faced with the necessity of rediscovering the life of the spirit. We must experience it anew for ourselves. It is the only way in which we can break the spell that binds us to the cycle of biological events.
Different thinkers draw the line between science and religion in different ways. Jung draws it along the frontier between the conscious and the unconscious minds. He always accepted that natural science gives us our only knowledge of the external physical world. But there's another world, also a common world, the inner world of the psyche. It expresses itself in the language of myth. And for Jung, religion is about that inner world and about the task of bringing the inner and outer worlds into harmony. All his life, he made objects in order to express and articulate his inner myths. Here's one that he made in 1958 when he was 83 years old. A primitive woman figure who stands for the anima, the feminine principle in his own psyche, is reaching up to draw milk from a mare, life-giving milk. It's looking forward to the age of Aquarius, when the feminine principle will be dominant, an age that stands under the constellation of Pegasus, the horse. Jung's psyche is prophesying the future. Not that Jung himself ever took such ideas literally. Rather, he sees our dreams, our fantasies, and our art as carrying messages from our psyche that point out to us the path of our own future spiritual fulfillment. The three sections of the completed tower represented for Jung the Trinity and the three parts of the soul. The heart of it, Jung's private meditation room, is still locked. Below, the open courtyard stands for nature. The whole complex makes up Jung's quaternity, the fourfold harmony, his favorite symbol for integration. Not surprisingly, Jung's approach to religion has been criticized. From his starting point, all religious ideas are equally valid as expressions of human psychic life, and all religious truths and religious objects are simply psychological. So he could be led up some pretty strange byways, not only astrology, but also alchemy and Gnosticism. And in his collected works, at least, he never speaks of God as being more than the God image in the human psyche. Nevertheless, within those limits, Jung was able to do a great deal. And in reply to charges of self-absorption or mysticism, he would answer that what our age most needs is a rediscovery of the life of the psyche. He would have said that he was performing a public service by retreating into his tower.
Not only do I leave the door open for the Christian message, but I consider it of central importance for Western man. It needs, however, to be seen in a new light, in accordance with the changes wrought by the contemporary spirit. Otherwise it stands apart from the times and has no effect on man's wholeness. The idea of God is an absolutely necessary psychological function of an irrational nature which has nothing whatever to do with the question of God's existence. The human intellect can never answer this question, still less give any proof of God. Moreover, such proof is superfluous, for the idea of an all-powerful divine being is present everywhere, unconsciously if not consciously, because it is an archetype. I therefore consider it wiser to acknowledge the idea of God consciously, for if we do not, something else is made God, usually something quite inappropriate and stupid, such as only an enlightened intellect could hatch forth.
And did you believe in God?
Oh, yes.
Do you now believe in God?
Now? Difficult to answer. I know. I don't need to believe. I know.
What did Jung mean by claiming at the end of his life to know God? Remember the journey he'd taken. As a young man, he'd broken away from religion and joined Freud. He accepted Darwin's revolution in our understanding of man's place in nature. He accepted that the human mind is an evolutionary product and religion a natural psychological function. Religious beliefs give mythic, projected expression to our inner states. Well, all this was standard 19th century atheist doctrine. Yet, when Jung turned back to religion, he didn't discard it. He took it with him. If our religious beliefs are clues to our inner lives, then in all their forms they're equally valuable and instructive. So Jung became perhaps the first genuinely multi-faith religious thinker. But even more original was Jung's new form of religious naturalism. Before him, those who'd grasped that religion is indeed fully human had always ended up as unbelievers, people like Marx and Freud. But Jung finds a way back. Realizing that religion is truly human, he sets aside supernaturalism and instead he brings forward the old mystical idea that the knowledge of God is in the end the same thing as self-knowledge. For Jung, the knowledge of God means a condition of inner integration, blessedness, wisdom, harmony with oneself and all nature, that our psyches are pursuing all our lives. So far, Freud's position, his public reputation, has been higher. But Jung's new sort of religious naturalism has a lot to teach all of us. Indeed, I suspect in the end we're all going to have to follow him. And here at Bollingham, it's surely right to give him the last word.
My life is the story of the self-realization of the unconscious. What we are to our inward vision can only be expressed by way of myth. Myth is more individual and expresses life more precisely than does science. Thus it is that I have undertaken to tell my personal myth. We cannot make any final judgment about ourselves or our lives. At bottom, we never know how it has all come about. The life of man is a dubious experiment. It is a tremendous phenomenon only in numerical terms. Individually, it is so fleeting that it is literally a miracle that anything can exist and develop at all. In the end, the only events in my life worth telling are those when the imperishable world erupted into this transitory one. Everything else has lost importance by comparison. I can understand myself only in the light of inner happenings. It is these that make up the singularity of my life.